So what's the story with oats? You know, the oat lobby has done such a great job of persuading the public that oats are heart healthy, that even people in my Wheat Belly and Undoctored programs, where we are 100% grain free, will still ask, well, gee, aren't oats heart healthy? So where does that heart healthy claim come from? Well, it comes from the fact that oats are indeed rich in something called beta glucan, which is a form of soluble fiber that, upon consumption, does indeed reduce total and LDL cholesterol. And while I poo-poo those kinds of crude measurements, that is true, and that can be modestly beneficial. So what's the problem? Well, oats, just like all other grains, are seeds of grasses. They're all seeds of grasses. That's, by definition, that's what grains are. And they all share a carbohydrate called amylopectin A. Amylopectin A is the super carbohydrate of grain. I call it a super carbohydrate because the amylopectin A of grains yields a rise in blood sugar even worse than table sugar. And that's because we have an enzyme called amylase in our saliva and in our stomachs that's very efficient at digesting amylopectin A. And that explains why, for instance, 2 slices of whole wheat bread raise blood sugar higher than 6 teaspoons of table sugar. Well, the same kind of phenomenon applies to oats because it's rich in amylopectin A. You know, there are other forms of amylopectin. Beans, legumes, for instance, are rich in amylopectin C, which is not efficiently digested. It's inefficiently digested and does not raise blood sugar very much unless you consume a lot. But the amylopectin A of grains, the seeds of grasses, is very efficiently digested and it yields a sharp and substantial rise in blood sugar. So if you ate oatmeal, let's say 1 cup of uncooked oatmeal, cooked, slow cooked, no added sugar, no sweeteners, no fruit, nothing, just plain oatmeal, a typical blood sugar response in a non-diabetic person would be a rise of blood sugar, say, from 90 or 100 to 150 to 180 milligrams per deciliter. In other words, very high. What are the consequences of that? Well, whenever blood sugar ranges that high, it does all sorts of things. It provokes insulin resistance if it's repeated over time. It causes growth of visceral fat, that is tummy fat, and weight gain. And it induces something called glycation. Glycation is irreversible glucose modification of proteins. So if you glycate the proteins in the lenses of your eyes, you get cataracts over time. If you glycate the cartilage cells and proteins in your knees and hips, you get brittle cartilage that leads to arthritis and bone-on-bone arthritis. If you glycate LDL particles, you get heart disease. If you glycate the skin, you get skin thinning, age spots, and accelerated skin aging. So glycation is a very, very important process to know about. And how do you cause glycation, endogenous glycation? By having high blood glucose. Every time blood glucose ranges above 100, you glycate more and more and more. So that blood sugar of 150 to 180 in a non-diabetic after consuming oatmeal is not a good idea. If you have insulin resistance, prediabetes, diabetes, a typical blood sugar could be 200 to 350, sometimes higher. Sky high blood sugars because of the amylopectin A. That 1 cup of uncooked oatmeal that you slow cook yields about 46 grams net carbs, which is an awful lot. You know, my Wheat Belly and Undoctored programs, we restrict ourselves to no more than 15 grams net carbs per meal, because that's the level at which there's little to no rise in blood sugar, and we don't generate insulin resistance. We have virtually no acceleration of glycation, but that 1 cup of oatmeal yields 46 grams net carbs. Now, people often add slices of banana, right, berries, some sweeteners, milk. Now you're talking about 65, 70, 80, 90 grams net carbs, and all those adverse effects are even further amplified. Now, oats have also been associated with provocation of type 1 diabetes. Now, those data are observational and thereby not real solid. But there is better evidence to show us that the gliadin protein of wheat and the zein protein of corn are indeed powerful provokers of the process that leads to type 1 diabetes in kids. So even though the data are still limited with oats and are observational, it's so consistent with what we know with related proteins. And by the way, those proteins are called prolamine proteins. The adenine protein of oats, the gliadin of wheat, secalin of rye, the zein of corn. These are all called prolamine proteins, and they're called that because they're rich in the amino acid proline. And amino acid sequences that include proline are often not well digested by the enzymes we have in our digestive tracts. And that's part of the reason why we get autoimmune effects from consumption of seeds of grasses. Oats are rich in fungal mycotoxins. This has been a perennial problem with oats, that they seem to be a good place to grow fungi. That's why mushroom farmers often grow them in oats. But the oatmeal you buy, the oats you buy, are often contaminated by fungal mycotoxins, sometimes toxic levels. And these are carcinogenic and other toxic properties. So oats are a common source of fungal mycotoxins. The avidin protein of oats can mimic the gliadin protein of wheat in reigniting celiac disease. This is similar to the way that the zein protein of corn can reignite celiac disease. People with celiac disease are told to be gluten-free and told to eat gluten-free foods. One of the most common ingredients in gluten-free foods is corn starch. Now, that's the starch of corn, not the protein, but the corn starch is often contaminated with the zein protein. So all those products made with gluten-free ingredients like cornstarch can reignite celiac disease. Likewise, the avidin protein of oats can reignite celiac disease in some people with celiac disease. Oats also, like many other grains, seeds of grasses, contain something called phytates. And phytates are very good at binding positively charged minerals like iron, zinc, calcium, magnesium, copper, manganese. And when the phytates of grains, say from a bowl of oatmeal or a sandwich made with 2 slices of whole wheat bread, the phytates bind those positively charged minerals, most of them, and you pass it out in the toilet. That's why, for instance, there's lots and lots of iron deficiency anemia in people who consume a lot of grains. That's why children can get impaired immunity because they consume a lot of grains and they become zinc deficient. That impairs your immune response. That's why a lot of people get skin rashes from consuming grains because it binds all the zinc. So multiple nutritional deficiencies develop from consumption of oats as they do with other grains. And then lastly, oats can be a common source of allergy. The allergy can show up as asthma, it can show up as gastrointestinal upset, it can show up as skin rashes. Now, skin rashes can occur from oral consumption of oats or from topical application of like creams or other products that contain oats. That's very common in children, for instance. So oats do have something good in them, the beta-glucan soluble fiber. Unfortunately, it comes with too much bad baggage, like the amylopectin A that raises blood sugar and insulin, the fungal mycotoxins, provocation of the celiac response, phytates, etc. So this is very common. There's no way to disable the adverse effects of the seeds of grasses, because seeds of grasses, if you ran into a field and you and your family were starving and you ran into a field of grass, would you say, "Hallelujah, we eat well tonight"? Probably not, because humans don't view grass as food. It's testimony to the cleverness of humans, ancient humans, who managed just 10,000 years ago to figure out a way to isolate the seed of each grass blade, dry it, pulverize it, and grind it into a flour or use it to ferment things like beer and bread. So it is testimony to the cleverness of humans, but it was a critical error to consume something that kept you alive another week, 4 weeks, months, but impaired long-term health. And that's true for all seeds of grasses, including oats. If you enjoy these conversations, I invite you to subscribe to my YouTube channel or join my conversations in my Wheat Belly blog and my Undoctored blog.